Okay folks, we're all set to get going here now in lesson number 4 in our brief series of studies entitled The Battle on the Cross. As you recall from the end of our last lesson, we are still dealing with some fundamental background information that lets us, let's get the signboard off there again, that lets us understand and appreciate the necessity for the battle on the cross. And we have seen already in connection with the Gentiles, by the end of chapter 11 there in Genesis, the Gentiles had been consigned over to satanic possession, consigned over to the power of darkness. And it's almost like the Lord just came along and said to Satan, you can have them. He separates Abram out from Ur of the Chaldees, brings him unto himself there, and sets him up and his seed as his own. But then we also saw a very interesting but also very important thing to understand and appreciate, and that's the fact that though God had called Abram and his seed unto himself and everything, he's at one of the first installment really in God's program with Abram and his seed, as he develops him into the nation in preparation for being his great nation in that land he covenants to give Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his seed. The first installment involves them going down into satanic possession. And they do that when they go down into Egypt. That horror of great darkness once again that came upon Abram there in Genesis chapter 15 is directly connected to what God says to him about them going down into a land, being a stranger in a land that is not theirs, serving them, being afflicted by them, and so forth there. And we didn't see everything that we could have seen at that time to underscore and appreciate that. We took the opportunity, though, to look at some other passages and issues that come up later on, as with Moses in Deuteronomy 4, Solomon there in 1 Kings chapter 8, Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 52, looking back and seeing what happened when they went down into Egypt, how the Assyrians, Satan's man once again. And if you appreciate, if you follow the footsteps of the dragon, folks, you understand the issue of Satan's use of Assyria and the Assyrian. And when Israel went down to Egypt, and the Assyrian oppressed them with Satan's own man. And through him the great iron furnace concept was produced. And God, as both Moses and Solomon said, you brought your people unto yourself, you brought them out of that great iron furnace there. And there was really at that time a demonstration and a public declaration of the fact that these were God's people and they were not the possession of Satan. And God had really delivered them from the power of darkness at that time. He had sent them into it and He delivered them from it. But there's something that took place, folks, at that time in conjunction with God doing that and the way in which He did it, that has great bearing upon what He Himself does when He later functions as their Redeemer and ransomer, if I can coin that term, the one who ransoms Jacob from the hand of him that's stronger than he. Truth of the matter is, though God delivered Israel from the power of darkness back then when He brought them out of Egypt, they ended back up in satanic possession. We got to see that in this lesson. And the necessity, therefore, of the battle on the cross, for Israel especially, is founded upon that. The necessity of it, if the Gentiles were ever going to be utilized in God's plan and purpose, has already been established. So we need to see some further things here now with respect to what took place back at that time when God brought them out of Egypt. So to get ourselves underway and to resume our study on this, take your Bibles and turn to Exodus chapter 6. Now, once again, I have to limit myself on the things that I want to go over with you. I have to kind of pick out and select what I think is are the passages and the issues that deal with this in its most concise and yet most comprehensive form for you. And I hope that the things that we do look at not only give you the understanding and appreciation you need to have, but also trigger your interest all that much more and give you an appetite for examining these things further, and especially when it comes to the appreciation you can have for the magnificence of you being delivered from the power of darkness, having trusted Christ your Savior in this dispensation of grace as a twice dead Gentile, translated to the kingdom of God's dear Son. All this background information and the role of the battle in God's program with Israel helps you understand and appreciate all that much more for the mystery aspect of it you're a beneficiary of today in this dispensation of Gentile grace in which we live. And like I said, I hope that the few things we look at causes you to want to study these things out more and gain a further and a deeper appreciation for it. Exodus chapter 6 here. Now, there's some things that we really should at least take some note of, and I might just have to state it to you as that took place earlier on here. When you're in Exodus chapter 6 there, Moses and Aaron have already been commissioned, and they've gone back into Egypt there, and the basic utterances to Pharaoh have taken place. And as you pick it up here in the end of Exodus chapter 5 and the beginning of Exodus chapter 6 there, the reality of what God said he was going to do in connection with Pharaoh not letting the people go and hardening his heart. And in doing that, folks, what God's doing is he's getting the adversary to put on display and to execute his power against Israel. And to set it up in defiance against God. You got to remember who this character is, who this Pharaoh is. He's the Assyrian. He's Satan's own man. And when God hardens his heart and everything, he's doing that to provoke the adversary into doing this next step. And as you learn about later on in the 105th, 106th Psalm there and so forth. And if we have time, hopefully we'll be able to look at least something in the 106th Psalm there about God working his signs in Egypt. And the things that he did and the judgments that those things were against Egypt's gods and that system that was there. And against the character, the enemy, the one who hated Israel, who was there. But that's what's going on here. And when God informed Moses, gave Moses the fundamental information about what was going on there, he said, you're supposed to go on to Pharaoh there and you say, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And you let him go. You see, the interesting thing is Israel's in captivity to this guy. And God knew by uttering that to Pharaoh, to that Assyrian king, He's uttering it right to the adversary himself. He knows the grip once again there is the adversary's grip. The great furnace there and everything. It wasn't built by the men. The system of oppression and everything that exists in there in Egypt was by Satan's construction. And he produced the furnace for the destruction of Israel. And Israel's in satanic captivity there, and God sends Moses and Aaron, and you say to them, let my people go. They're my people. You've got my people in your grip there, and you let them go. Release them. But God's got a way in which he wants that done, and he's got a way in which he wants to infuriate the adversary. He's a way in which he wants the adversary to come along and try and match power for power and so forth. And he wants it to lead to a particular spot and to a particular demonstration and exercise of Satan's power. And that's his power of death. And that's the issue of the power he has as the possessor of the keys of death and hell. And God's working all this to get it that way and to get it to that issue. And as every power struggle takes place, God comes up and he just shows the power there to be nothing. Well, that's getting itself underway here. Moses and Aaron and the people of Israel, though God had said that to Moses and Aaron that was going to take place, it didn't click in their understanding as to exactly what it all meant and the why and wherefore of it. And that's why when you get to the end of chapter 5 there, Moses and Aaron, they come forth. And it's verse 22, Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people. Neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. Get that? Since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people. No, it's the issue. Since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name. Well, what's his name? What's the Lord come along in the very next verses and say? Then the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of the land, out of his land. And God spake unto Moses and said unto him, I am the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, Jehovah. And I appeared unto Abram, unto Isaac, unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah was I not known to them. And the issue, Moses, what he's saying is, the issue, Moses, is the fact that I'm putting my name Jehovah on display here. And it's my name Jehovah that's causing Pharaoh to inflict you evilly. It's my name Jehovah that's causing the adversary who's working behind him to respond like this and to evil entreat this people and to put that policy of evil and to clamp down and to get that iron furnace hotter and hotter and all that. Because the issue is my name Jehovah. The issue in his name Jehovah, once again, is the fact that I'll be whatever you need me to be to deliver you from your predicaments and make you into what my plan and purpose calls for. I'll be your help. The issue in God's Jehovah name is, at this particular time, is the issue of putting God's power against the adversary's power and having them butt heads and see who comes out on top. Moses now becomes aware of this. And there's really one aspect of that Jehovah name. The 7 main Jehovah compound names. There's really one aspect of that Jehovah name that's being put on display here. And that's the issue of God providing himself as the means of redemption and ransoming. And him coming himself to contend with the adversary and to deal with him. And to ransom Israel from the hand of him that's stronger than he. Look at what he says. Once again, I just read the opening verse of chapter 6 there. Verse 4, he goes on and says, and I also have established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan and the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they were strangers. I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians kept in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, Jehovah, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm. Stretched out arm, that's the exercise of his power. And with great judgments. And I'll take you to me for a people, and I'll be to you a God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, etc. there. Now they don't know at this particular time the significance of all those great judgments. They're taught them later. And they don't know at this particular time the significance of that redemption and the outstretched arm and the power that's displayed. And the staging of a battle that takes place in preparation for the one that's coming down the road. That's explained to them later. But in view of what we have seen of later explanation, we're looking back here now to gain some appreciation for what takes place back at this time. Now we're going to have to limit ourselves to the issue that we're concerned with. And like I mentioned a moment ago, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart after each of these displays of God's power against Satan's power there, and so forth there is to infuriate the adversary and get him to keep on working the best that he can and everything. He's able to match God for a period of time there with counterfeit type thing, demonstrations of power and everything, even though he ends up succumbing to them. And then there's a point where his magicians can't do anything about that, and then he himself has to go into effect. That's why the stoppage took place there. Because what God did was to work it to the point where he himself now had to operate. And he was going to have to leave his tools, so to speak, and start dealing with his own arms and hands and his own energy. And eventually he was going to be backed up And eventually he's going to have to resort to the place where his greatest strength lay. And that was in the midst of the Red Sea, as Leviathan in the sea. Come over very quickly here to Psalm 106. Psalm 106. Like I just said, the people of Israel don't understand the significance of things right away. And the psalmist here is going to talk about that issue. Moses understood some things. Things were clicking with him. And we'll see when the Red Sea incident is over, he comes along and the song that he leads Israel in singing and everything like that talks about that very issue. But look at this first of all here, Psalm 106, verse 7. Our fathers understood not thy wonders in Egypt. They remembered not the multitude of thy mercies, but provoked him at the sea, even at the Red Sea. Nevertheless, he saved them for his name's sake. Notice that. He saved them for the sake of what his name, Jehovah, meant. Just like we saw a few moments ago, the thing that was infuriating the adversary through Pharaoh was Moses says, I came and spake unto him in your name, Jehovah. That's why the adversary through Pharaoh comes, who is the Lord? That's a bravado challenge to the issue of God's Jehovahness. The issue wasn't who is God. The issue was who is the Lord. Nevertheless, he saved them, verse 8, for his name's sake, that he might make his mighty power to be known. That's the issue of Jehovah is putting his power into effect for the ones he's dealing with, to deliver them from the predicaments that they're in. Verse 9, he rebuked the Red Sea also, and it was dried up. So he led them through the depths as through the wilderness. And he saved them from the hand of him, singular, that hated them, and redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. They didn't understand what was going on at that time. The psalmist who's writing this now, looking back, understands what was going on at that time. God delivered Israel from the hand of him, singular, an individual that hated them. That's the adversary himself, through the person of that Assyrian king there. And he redeemed them from the hand of the enemy, as opposed to God's plan and purpose with Israel. He redeemed them. Now notice, in connection with doing that, the Red Sea is the central issue. And notice it says that God rebuked it. When you rebuke something, or you rebuke someone, you speak to it. And you see it as opposing you. And you see it as opposition, adversarial to you. And you see the evil intent in that thing. And you rebuke it. And when he rebuked the Red Sea, it was dried up, he says. And then God led them through the depths as through the wilderness. There's something about the Red Sea, folks, that a lot of Christians never understand. And exactly how much we're going to get into right now, I'll say enough so you understand the issue. But I'm going to reserve, I think, a lot to say about it, and that I want to say about it until later. But the major opening to the pit, into the heart of the earth, for the compartments of hell and so forth, is under the waters of the Red Sea. And when God brought Israel through the Red Sea, He brought them through the very part of it in which the opening to the pit was. And he rebuked those, Leviathan, the adversary, was in that sea. It's a stronghold. We'll see some of those things later on. But you need to understand some fundamental things about this. Otherwise, that 69th Psalm about the Messiah going into death and the waters overflow, and that's not going to make any sense to you. You just come along and say, well, it's just figures of speech. No, it's not, folks. It's not figures of speech. It's reality. But when the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt and brought them through the Red Sea, that on the very spot he did that was where the major opening to the pit is. And Israel was given to understand that later. Now I want to take you back with me to Exodus chapter 15. Exodus chapter 15, to when the event is historically over and the Lord's victory song is sung by Israel at the prompting of Moses. Moses is the one who understands what's going on. And he leads Israel in the victory song. And he understood what God did and what took place at the Red Sea there. And he understood the redemption and the ransoming concept. And what I want you to understand is the fundamentals of what he understood. And what I want you to understand also is that the infuriation of the adversary that was produced at that time, and you got to think about that once again that's the end of the sequence of the judgments. That's the end of the sequence of God's power being made known. That's the end of the sequence of the power struggle and everything. And Satan is put in the position of having to go to his greatest strength. As the one with the power of death, he held the keys of death and hell. He had the key for the opening of the pit. And as Israel's going across that thing, well, we'll see it when we get to it. But he's put into a position of rage and infuriation over the fact that his greatest strength fails him. And in a sense, he calls foul in connection with this. But that was designed so that the battle the Messiah would enter into would have no holes barred on his part. And that Satan would release everything he had, would hold back nothing, would reserve nothing. In fact, the end of the battle on the cross is an exhausted, power-drained adversary. Exodus chapter 15. Pick up verse 1. Well, take the last 3 verses of chapter 14. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Not like the great work. This was the great one. And it wasn't just great in the visibleness of the massiveness of what took place. It was a great work in dealing with the adversary. He'd been backed up to employ his greatest strength. Verse 1. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord. So then sang Moses and the children. Moses is the one who, it's Moses' words. He puts the, and he rehearses it, and they sing it. And they sing it unto the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital. They sing it unto God's Jehovahness. And spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, Jehovah, for he hath triumphed gloriously. There's a battle there. And see, there's a parallel. The battle there, the battle here. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The Lord, it's interesting, they go, as Moses, as they sing the song here and everything, they go from what they can see to what they can't see. And Moses takes them through with the song. This is what you saw, but there's some things you didn't see. But it took place nevertheless at the exact same time. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him a habitation. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Now hold on a second. What does it say back there in verse 30? And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. But the depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Okay. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. We're starting to move from the visible to the... Thy right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. Dashed in pieces. There's another psalm that talks about at this time, and it talks about breaking the heads of the dragon, breaking the heads of Leviathan, and giving them, spreading the pieces over there, and giving them to people in the wilderness there. We should deal with that, but I'm biting my tongue on that right now. But anyway, we'll see what happens later on. And in the greatness of thine excellency, thou hast overthrown them that rose up again. Notice the issue of the greatness of your power, the greatness of thy excellency, and so forth. There was a struggle going on here. There was a challenge. There was a power against power issue being met here. Thou sentest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble. Well, wait a minute. Water was used. They drowned. And you consumed them as stubble? Remember what the original intent was here. The great iron furnace had been set up. Who was going to consume who? The great iron furnace was going to consume Israel as stubble. Oh, tables get turned. And Satan's own people end up being consumed as stubble. And with the blast of thy nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright as an heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. Moses understood that in the heart of the sea was the abyss, the depths, the openings of the pit. God rebukes the Red Sea. That's uncovered. The waters stand up as a heap. The floods stand up upright. As God, the blast of his nostrils, he deals with Satan's great stronghold in the heart of the earth and the very opening of it under the sea there. And Leviathan swimming around there with the keys of death and hell in his hands, getting ready to open that door up, and as Israel tries to go across, go down in. And the Lord blasts that open. But before he brings his people across, he congeals the depths in the heart of the sea. and the opening is made solid. The enemy said, I'll pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil, my lust shall be satisfied upon them, I'll draw my sword, mine hand shall destroy them. Notice it's I, it's not we. Those Egyptians, man, they're just the pawns of the adversary. I'll pursue them, I'll overtake them, I'll divide the spoil, my lust shall be satisfied, my lust for destroying them. And thwarting the God's recovery of the earth process through them. Will be satisfied upon. I'll draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. Thou didst blow with thy wind, the sea covered them. They sank as lead in the mighty waters. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? See, that's what was judged out there. Who is like unto thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? Thou stretched out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them. We'll look at a passage later on as we amplify upon this issue and see it, especially in connection with Psalm 69, the Lord entering into death and everything like that. That when the earth swallows, you go down into the pit. And you end up in one of the compartments of hell off it. That's where that's where Satan wanted Israel to go. And he's pursued, and he's overtaken them, and he's there. And the Lord tells him to go across. And he's got the keys of death and hell, and he's trying to open the door there, so to speak, and they're going over top of him there, and the thing's congealed, and they're not coming through. And Israel gets on the other side, and the Egyptians come through, and the congealing's gone, and the waters come back. And now the earth swallows them up. And they go down in the pit. When God brings Israel across the Red Sea, He brings them across the very physical location on the face of this earth in which the major opening to the pit exists. And He brings them across the very sea in which Leviathan dwells, the great dragon in the sea. By the way, there's a lot of background information you need in connection with understanding and appreciating and fully understanding and why the Red Sea and all this kind of business. We don't have time for that right now. And there's far-reaching implications and ramifications to understanding and appreciating this. One of the reasons why when the new heavens, new earth, John said, I saw no sea. I don't see any water. In fact, there's water right there in the heavenly Jerusalem. It's on the earth. He said there's no more sea. There's a sea God's dedicated to destruction. It's that one right there, the Red Sea. Which is why He does that in the day of His wrath. Okay, we're going to look at this more. It's a fascinating subject, and everything. There's more that needs to be understood and appreciated about it, and we'll do that in due course. But right now, you need to have the reason why we've looked at and said what we have said about it and everything, so that you realize now when that event takes place, what God does in bringing Israel out of Egypt is He redeems them, ransoms them from the hand of Him that's stronger than they are, and they got into His hand because God put them down in there. And He brought the challenge to the adversary concerning his possession of them. And God brings them out. And he deals with them with the power struggle with Satan's power against his and everything, and backs Satan up to utilizing his greatest power, which is the power of death there at the very place where the opening of the pit is under the Red Sea. And where he stands there with the keys of death and hell, and zealously, lustfully, just wants people down in there, going down into his pit, behind his bars. But all that, folks, and the infuriation of the adversary that took place at that time, really sets the stage for that out there. and the battle that takes place out there, and Christ's entering into his power as the one with the power of death, and entering into a battle with him to take the keys of death and hell away from him. We'll talk more about that as we get to it, but we've covered that now, some essential background information. But as interesting as the opening of the pit there and everything is, just kind of put that in the back of your mind for right now until we come up and deal with it again. Now that Israel's out of Egypt, look at what the rest of Moses goes on to say here. Verse 13, he says, Thou in thy mercy hast led forth the people which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength unto thy holy habitation. Now see, as we saw last time in Deuteronomy chapter 4, with Solomon there in 1 Kings chapter 8, as Solomon said, you took them for thine inheritance, you made them thy people, but when thou broughtest them out of Egypt. Now that the declaration was made there to the world as a whole, to the adversary in particular, these are mine. They're untouchables to you. That type of thing. And now the readiness, as Moses says, you're going to bring them to your holy habitation. And now the issue is to look at that land. Once again, you had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you said you've given to them, and that we haven't dwelled in permanently yet and everything like that. We know what that is, Lord. That's your sanctuary. Let's read it here. Moses now goes on and sings about the plan and purpose God has with Israel now that they're heading into the land. The issue of the actual repossession of the earth is now going to get itself underway. Verse 14, the people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold in the inhabitants of Palestina. That's where we're going. Then the dukes of Edom shall be amazed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling shall take hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of thine arm they shall be as still as a stone, till thy people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over which thou hast purchased. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever. The issue is, let's go in there and get this kingdom established. Let's get the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant established. That's now with the redemption and the ransoming taking place and everything. Let's go do what we are as your people. Now, we have to do here, in the remainder of the time we have in this lesson, a real quick synopsis of Israel's history from this time until they become again Satan's captive. And they do that. They become again Satan's captive. They're not his captive now out of Egypt, and they aren't under the power of darkness under Egypt. Now they're out of Egypt. Now they're able to function as the light of the world. That's what they're able to do now. But they, in foolishness, reject the issue of continuing to be dealt with on the basis of God's Jehovah's and grace. God gives them 5 trials for their education in the necessity of that from the time they got out of Egypt until they come to Mount Sinai. And he even demonstrates their inability to be dealt with any other way than on the basis of his Jehovah's and grace, or they will never be what his plan and purpose calls for, and yet they reject that. They enter into the law contract. And as soon as they enter into that law contract, God's entire demeanor changes. Because now the issue is not to be dealt with by him on the basis of his Jehovah's and grace, but dealt with by him solely on the basis of his justice. And that's the worst thing Israel ever could have done. But they do it. And by so doing that, they also put themselves in the vulnerable position of becoming Satan's captives again. And that happens. Coming very quickly, if you would, to Deuteronomy chapter 13. Once they enter into the law contract and reject Jehovah's and grace, and to be dealt with on the basis of merit in the eyes of justice, they put themselves in a position in which they're vulnerable to the satanic policy of evil and re-captivity with him. And before they ever enter into the land, God warns them about the tactics of the policy of evil. and warns them about the fact that Belial is going to seek to get them in his captivity again. And a number of those warnings are set forth in the law contract itself. Here in Deuteronomy chapter 13 is an example of it. Deuteronomy 13 verse 1. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, Let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God proveth you, to know whether ye love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, obey his voice, you shall serve him, and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall ye put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commandeth thee to walk in. So shalt thou put the evil away from the midst. The Lord's coming out saying, that's part of the policy of evil, guys. By the way, notice he didn't talk about these signs and wonders not coming to pass. They do. It's satanic counterfeit of the power of God to validate a false doctrine and to get them to follow the false doctrine. But the whole issue is to get them back into the Egypt situation, to get them back into a bondage, get them back into where Satan has them as his captive, and this time legally. And if you come on down here, if you would, to verse 12, he says, If thou shalt hear say in one of thy cities, which the Lord thy God hath given thee to dwell therein, saying, Certain men, the children of Belial, one of Satan's names once again in connection with his function as the great red dragon, are gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of this city, saying, Let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known. Then he tells them what you do. You make inquiry if it's true, and everything. You smite the inhabitants, you utterly destroy it. You gather all the spoil together into one place, and every whit of it, he says there, for the Lord thy God, and it shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. Total destruction of it. Now, unfortunately, Israel's history is one of failing to do what it says there, as far as the satanic policy of evil is concerned. And by doing that, come very quickly, for example, over to 1 Samuel chapter 2. 1 Samuel chapter 2. And in the days of Samuel's youth, the satanic policy of evil and the children of Belial were well entrenched in Israel, so much so that Satan's own men ran the tabernacle of God at Shiloh. Eli's sons, as it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 2, as the priests of the tabernacle of God at Shiloh, were Satan's own men. Now we're just doing a quick synopsis here of realizing, understanding, and realizing that Israel, throughout their history, once they entered into the land, after the Mount Sinai there, and they crossed the Jordan River, entered into the land. And by the way, the reason why the Jordan River parted was very similar to the reason why the Red Sea parted, but we can't talk about that right now. But once they got into the land there and everything, they violated the law contract, started coming under the courses of punishment that are described there in Leviticus chapter 26. And each one of those courses of punishment is not only punishment, but it's also a further distancing of God from them. And when the fifth course of punishment comes, God leaves the land, he sends them out of the land, and they become Satan's captives again. The warning of Deuteronomy chapter 13 begins to be ignored near the end of Joshua's lifetime and his generation. He warns about in the last few chapters of Joshua. The book of Judges records Israel coming out of that first course of punishment, and since they failed to respond to that first course of punishment, the second course of punishment was ready to come, but by their failures to respond to that first course of punishment and get themselves straightened out by the chastisements and by the discipline of that punishment, they gave the children of Belial further entrenchment in the land. And by the time you get to 1 Samuel chapter 2 here, when the first course of punishment is winding down its duration of time, Satan's own men ran the tabernacle. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething, with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also, before they burnt the fat, the servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then they would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I'll take it by force. Wherefore, the kind of interesting parallel there between, oh, never mind. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. And it goes on, describes things even further, even their fornication, adultery, and so forth. They're right there with the women at the door of the tabernacle. Sons of Belial, Satan's own men, ran Israel's religious worship. By the way, they did it when the Lord was here also. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, chief priests, they were Satan's own men, John 8:44. We'll look at that verse eventually. Come on over now, if you would, to Isaiah chapter 49. We're going to be moving here. We've got about 15 minutes left, and more than can adequately be covered in that period of time. Isaiah chapter 49. As Israel goes through those courses of punishment, like I said, when you understand those courses of punishment, you deal with the judgment and the chastisement once again, a desire to get Israel to be reformed by those things, as it says. But if they don't reform, there's a distancing that takes place, further and further distancing of God from them, and a further and further infuriation and response of God's holiness and righteousness to them, to the point when the fifth course comes, he says, my soul abhors you, and he drives them from the land, and he himself physically leaves the land of Israel. And as Isaiah, he says, the enemy is coming to thy land, O Emmanuel. And Satan takes possession of the land. The times of the Gentiles begin, and he takes possession of the land, and his people, Israel, goes into his captivity. And the fifth course is the issue that's coming as Isaiah is functioning at the end of the fourth course of punishment. And he talks about the worth of the fifth course to come, but he talks especially about what's going to take place under that fifth course of punishment. And he especially, in the passage we're going to look at right now, deals with the issue of Israel in satanic captivity again. Isaiah chapter 49. Now, Isaiah asks some questions almost like in the sense of this is incredible. Because after describing the predicament Israel is in, God comes along in the opening verses, and the most of Isaiah chapter 49 declares that there's still going to be what his plan and purpose calls for. There's still going to be glory. They're going to be released from the power of the Gentiles. In fact, look at verse 22. Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders, and kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face toward the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, Jehovah. For they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. You're going, the fifth course of punishment started. You guys are going into Gentile captivity and everything. You're going to go through, as you go through the installments of that fifth course of punishment, a time of trouble that's never come upon this earth. And then unless I shorten those days, no flesh will be saved, including my remnant. And he's given Isaiah the gist of that concept and everything. And Isaiah understands the fact that Israel's going into satanic captivity. And in view of the fact that God says they're going to be delivered, he comes along now in verse 24 and says, Shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captive delivered? It's like you can't believe that this could ever really occur. The nature of the prey, the nature of the captivity has been described in such detail that Isaiah can't see how in the world Israel could ever be extricated from the grip of the one who's holding them, the adversary. He's taken them as his prey and has begun to devour them, and they are his lawful captives. Notice that they're lawful captives. By their violation of the law contract, they have lawfully been delivered over to him. And Isaiah says, can he be delivered? Verse 25, But thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. See, there's a mighty one's got you captive, Israel, but the captives shall be taken away from him. There's a terrible one that's made you his prey, and he's devouring you, but you will be delivered from him. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save that. By the way, notice the prey issue there. Satan's original attempt, once again, back in Egypt, the great fire to consume them as stubble. God brings them out and all that, but the issue now is not going to be a great fire, a great iron furnace any longer. The issue now, he's going to function as a lion who's going to go about and seeking them as prey and devouring them. And that's why Satan's spoken about like that in connection with his work with the Messiah there in Psalm 22. And that's why Peter, as he talks to the remnant there, and talks to the remnant again out there, talks about your adversary as a great roaring lion, going about seeking who he may devour. And that's why in Revelation 12, there, at the great red, he seeks to devour them, and devour the man-child. The issue is, he wants them as his prey, and he goes after them. But the issue here is that's what they become. They become his prey whom he's devouring. They become his lawful captive. And they can't get out of his grip. He's the strong one, the mighty one, who's holding Jacob in his grip. And Jacob can't even begin to move one of those fingers to release the grip. And it's getting stronger, and it's crunching down, and he's asphyxiating him. And unless God put his Jehovahness into effect for Israel, Jacob would die and wither in his grip. But that's the issue. God will put his Jehovahness into effect for Israel. Even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. How is it going to take place, though? For I, the Lord, will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. The way in which the deliverance is going to take, the way in which the lawful captivity is going to be broken, the way in which the terrible, the prey is going to be delivered from the terrible, the mighty is going to be taken away, the captive is going to be taken away from the mighty one, is because I'm going to contend with him, singular, that contendeth with thee. I'm going to contend with the adversary. I'm going to fight him. I'm going to enter into a battle with him. And the issue at stake is going to be the finality of his power to hold you in his grip. And I will feed them. Now he's going to deal with his cohorts. I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh. And I'm going to contend with him that contends with you right there, and I'm going to feed them with their own flesh out there. Day of the Lord. And they shall be drunken with their own blood as with sweet wine, and all flesh shall know, get this, all flesh shall know that I, the Lord, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. 3 titles corresponding with the 3 aspects of his Jehovahness and grace that take care of the first 3 mandates of the Davidic covenant, in which the enemy and his enemies and his are vanquished in totality. I'm your Redeemer. I'm your deliverer, Savior. I'm the mighty one of Jacob that can avenge my cause with you upon him and them. And that'll end when he comes back, and then I'll be your king and your blesser. Because he says, I'll contend with him that contendeth with thee. That's why when you get down to chapter 50, and he starts, and he gets back to again, starts giving some of the detail. The contention once again is the battle on the cross. We're familiar with it already. We'll look at it one more time here right now, and in preparation for. Come on down with verse 7. For the Lord God will help me, therefore shall I not be confounded. Therefore have I set my face like a flint, and I know that I shall not be ashamed. He is near that justifies me. Who will contend with me? The who is the one right back there in verse 25 of chapter 49. I'll contend with him that contends with thee. That's the who, and the Lord's on the cross there. And he says, come on, let's get it over with. Come very quickly with me if you would. Israel, once again, becomes Satan's lawful captive. That's what takes place. And for the duration of the 5th course of punishment, that's what she's under. Satanic captivity. Come very quickly if you would with me over to Zechariah chapter 3. When the 2nd installment in the 5th course of punishment it commences, Israel's captivity to Satan is underscored once again, and Zechariah is given to see it. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke thee, O Satan. Even the Lord hath chosen Jerusalem, rebuke thee. Is this not a brand plucked out of the fire? And so forth there. Zechariah is given a vision to see how that Israel's religious leaders and life and everything will be delivered from filthiness. But the one who's made them filthy and is there to resist Joshua's cleansing is Satan. And the issue is he's right there in the land of Israel. And he's buddy-buddy with Israel's religious leaders. Now, not Joshua at this time, but he becomes that. John chapter 8. John's Gospel chapter 8. Let's get an appreciation for the fact that when the Lord comes to Israel, when the fourth installment of that fifth course of punishment begins to get itself underway, Israel's religious leaders are Satan's men, almost without exception. John chapter 8, verse 44. We referred to this verse by reference a few moments ago. John chapter 8, verse 44. The Lord talking to the Pharisees there, Israel's religious leaders, most prominent ones and everything, but not just them, but the whole host of the chief priests and all that kind of business. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. It's interesting, get that lust concept. He wanted to have his lust upon them when he brought them out of Egypt and everything there, and now the lusts are being fulfilled by Israel's own people. Israel's own religious leaders are fulfilling Satan's desires within the land of Israel. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And you guys have bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and you're his. And you're propagating it for him in Israel. Israel is his lawful captive. One more time very quickly back to Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, where we actually began looking at things at the beginning of our last lesson. Luke chapter 4. Satan's tempting the Lord here and everything. Talks about his possession of the kingdoms and everything. But he does that from the land of Israel, folks. And when he shows him all the kings of the world in a moment of time, Israel's included in that. And he says, it's mine. And he was right. They become his lawful captive. Luke chapter 4, verse 5 and verse 6. And the devil, taking him, Jesus, up into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. If thou wilt worship me, therefore worship me, all shall be thine. Showed him all the kings of the world in a moment of time. That included Israel. Israel at the times of the Gentiles. And they were part of that fourth Gentile dominion spoken about in Daniel. They'd been swallowed up by that kingdom. All the kings of the world include Israel. The high mountain is in the land of Israel. And Satan's standing. He's in the land. He's got his unclean spirits in the land. Mark chapter 5. The Lord cast out at least 2,000 of those unclean spirits. They go into the swine there, and a perfect example of Satan having his way there. Israel's raising swine, pigs, unclean animals to them. But those unclean spirits said, "Don't send us out of the country. They're there." In fact, in my understanding, there were more of Satan's unclean spirits in the land of Israel than there were Israelites, and far more than there were justified Israelites. That's how much control he had. That's how much they were his lawful captive. Now we're going to look at some things in connection with that even a little further as we get ourselves underway. But folks, that's pretty much the background you and I need to understand for the battle. You need to understand the necessity of the battle. And because Israel's become Satan's lawful captive again, God, the Messiah, God has to come, put his Jehovah into effect, and release them from that contend with him that contends with Israel. And that's going to involve the battle on the cross. Now, in order to appreciate some further details about that and everything, we need to understand something about the Davidic covenant, and we're going to cover that in the next lesson. And we need to do what I'm calling for preparing for the battle, and then the prelude, and then the battle itself. But the things we've covered up till now and everything are vital to be able to fully understand and appreciate the battle on the cross, not only in connection with God's program with Israel, but the things that we've covered that you need to understand and appreciate so you can appreciate the deliverance you've received in this dispensation of grace. Because the truth of the matter is, by Israel becoming Satan's lawful captive, they got themselves in the exact same boat you and I Gentiles had already been in. Okay, that concludes Lesson 4. We'll pick it up next time at Lesson 5 and deal, like I said, with the significance of the Davidic covenant, or some significant matters of it, and preparing for the battle, dealing with the historical things that take place leading up to it, as set forth here in the Gospel accounts. Until next time.